living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
If you were having a heart attack, would you know the symptoms? You might think they would be obvious, but the warning signs can be different for different people, especially between men and women. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Today we'll have a heart-to-heart about cardiovascular health with a focus on women's heart health. Stay tuned, we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Heart disease can present differently in different people and differently in women than it does in men. This can be dangerous for people when they don't recognize what's happening or when they put off getting treatment. Joining us first this morning is Betty Reed, who had a heart attack a year ago in August and who also happens to be my mom. Thanks for being here, Mom.
Hi, Beth.
So let's start out by talking about the heart health issues that run in our family. So both Grandma and Grandpa had heart health issues. Can you talk about your mom and dad a little bit?
The heart problems go back in generations for years and years and years. And my dad was really quite young when he started having his issues. He was in his 40s. And had his first heart attack at 45. My mom had two bypass surgeries, 16 years apart. And my dad died in 1980 at the age of 65. My mom died in 2009 at the age of 84. And the biggest thing that I see and the difference in that was the amount of changes in medicine that were able to stretch her life a little bit longer than his.
And you saw Grandpa have heart attacks.
We were at the house when he had a couple of them, and his were, there was the pain and the sweating and, the weakness, but that wasn't anything that showed up when mine appeared.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. But he had the chest pain and some of those more typical symptoms that you would think of heart attacks.
Yeah, definite sweating.
Okay, and so then you started having heart health issues. So when did that start for you?
Well, I was put on blood pressure medicine in my 40s. And my first stents were put in when I was 55. We had, where I was working at the time, I had to go up a long flight of stairs. And by the time I got to the top, I couldn't breathe. And so I called the doctor. They said, come in for an EKG. And they sent me right to the hospital. And in no time at all, I was in the cath lab.
And so Grandma and Grandpa both had heart issues. And as you said, it goes back for a ways. You had already had some heart health issues. But then about a year ago, this past summer, that's when you had issues where you weren't feeling well, but can you take us back to that night and what happened there?
Dad and I had gone out to dinner, and a lot of the symptoms would always kind of come forward after a dinner, and I figured I'd just eat too much, of course. But so that was where the heartburn business came in. So that we had gone out to dinner and we were home, and I just was not feeling well. And I started doing everything I could think of that would take care of the heartburn, and it just nothing was really taking care of it. And so I sometimes if I just spread out on the floor, so I just laid down on the floor, and then when I tried to get back up into the chair, things did not go well. So I had always told your dad that unless I can walk out of here, don't you ever call an ambulance. So he didn't even think twice. He picked up the phone and called 911, and we don't live that far from them for where they keep their station. So it wasn't too long and they were at the house.
Okay, and so then what happened when they got there?
Oh, they came in, and first thing they did was hook me up to an EKG and just kind of check all my symptoms and all my vitals. And none of the sweating was there like with my dad. And I kept convincing myself that it was heartburn. It was all along it was heartburn. But when they came in, and they said, after they saw the EKG, then they talked amongst themselves and decided that we were on our way to the hospital. So they put me in this fancy dandy chair and hauled me out to the ambulance.
And you said too, in addition to the heartburn, you were having a really bad stomach ache that went into your back.
Yeah, the pain was on the top of my stomach and went around to the middle of my back.
Okay.
But sometimes just a little pressure on my stomach would kind of relieve that. But there wasn't anything that I could do that night that made things any better.
So you got to the hospital, and then what happened?
Okay, well, they zipped me through the emergency room very quickly. And I was in the cath lab before you knew it. And they were talking, saying that this was, that definitely, the people in the ambulance did too, that they kept trying to give me nitro. And I had had some issues with that earlier in my heart history that made my blood pressure bottom out. So I was a little worried about doing it at this little teeny tiny little room on wheels, but they did do it, and it took the pain away somewhat, but it didn't get rid of it. So when I got to the hospital, I was still having some discomfort, but it didn't take them long to get me ready to go and get me in the cath lab.
So at what point did you finally realize that this is not just a stomach ache, this isn't just heartburn, this was a heart attack?
I kept trying to convince the doctor that it was heartburn. But as we left the cath lab, so I said something about my heartburn, and he goes, "No, this was the real thing this time." And I have a number of stents, and he said there's probably no room for any more. So the next time, he said it's the big show next time.
Yeah. So looking back now and remembering what that was really like, that it was different than other stomach aches you've had, what advice would you give to people who may be suffering the same kind of symptoms, whether it's a man or a woman? What would you say to them if they know they have a history of heart issues and in their family as well as in their own life?
Well, my first thought, and I think other people too, is that when you're at home and you're not feeling well, we all avoid having to take a trip to the hospital, especially in an ambulance with the sirens and the lights going.
Right.
But we just kind of, don't wait too long. Bob finally said, we better call for help. Mm-hmm. But the only thing I can think of is just, I waited a long time. I really did. I could have been in some bigger trouble if I hadn't. But, if all those antacids and things don't take care of that pain, that I had, you just need to get on your way and pay more attention to what your body's trying to tell you.
Good. Better safe than sorry.
That's right.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right, we need to take a break. But we've heard just how confusing a heart attack can be for some people. Coming up next, we'll hear from a doctor about the differences when it comes to heart disease and what could be life-saving information. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.